my guest is Wrath James White. Is that correct?
That's correct. How are you?
I'm all right, dude. What are you up to?
Oh, I just actually just got back from the gym a little while. No, that's not true. Went to the gym, then went out to eat. Then I came home.
Yeah, I got here from the gym like 20 minutes ago. So yeah. So I know your early career, like uh you were a kickboxer or Muay Thai fighter. And then
Yes, yes.
I remember we talked about that at Killercon. I was a little bit surprised. Like I didn't know that part of your background.
Yeah, I actually started training Muay Thai in '93
Ralph, he won't.
Okay.
He
and
won't. He won't check low kicks.
turned
He's going to
pro
probably take
in
every low kick.
'97.
He's probably going to punch his way out of it.
So, yeah, it's been a wild
Oh,
ride.
he
So I
was.
fought
My
in
mistake.
Pride
Yeah, he
1, I
did check
fought in
that one.
Pride 2, I fought in K1.
I was
So
gonna
I
ask about that. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so I had quite a career. Did some boxing also.
Okay, what did you think of Pride? Did you like Pride better than K1 or K1 better?
They were similar. Uh, they were both insanely big compared to the at the time. You go to a Muay Thai match in America, and there would be 1,000, 2,000 people at the most.
But
And my first fight in Japan, there were 45,000 people.
holy
It
shit,
was
yeah.
yeah, it was in a baseball stadium. So that was yeah, that was a surprise to me. And it was broadcast on Nippon TV, which is the equivalent of ABC or NBC here. So it was pretty wild.
It was a much bigger deal, yeah.
Yeah.
Like right up until like everything got shut down with the Yakuza and all that stuff and the UFC took over, I guess like that was where it was happening. Like it wasn't the US
Yeah.
because like I remember the early UFC got banned from like what was it like 48 states,
Yeah,
49
exactly.
states. But so what I know a little bit about your history of getting into writing, like you and Brian Keane were friends, right? And it was like
Well, actually I went to high school of creative performing arts, and I was a creative writing major then. And I
okay.
actually started writing my first novel when I found out that I was going to be a father for the first time. I was at the time I was working as a bouncer, and when I found out I was about to have a son, I imagined years down the line my son being asked what his dad did for a living, and I didn't want him to say bouncer. I thought author sounded a lot better and kickboxer, so I actually decided to turn pro and also started writing my first novel at the same time. That was 90, yeah, 93, 94.
Did you have one that you were like, this is gonna be my future goal, or you're like, I'm gonna try the waters in both and I'll see which one grabs me?
Yeah, I kind of did both, but I wound up for a while there. I definitely wound up focusing more on the Muay Thai. I'd written two novels before I really even got into the writing world. Like I hadn't joined the HWA. I hadn't gone to a writers convention. I hadn't met any of the guys who wound up really influencing my career, like Brian Keane, as you mentioned, Edward Lee, all those guys. Didn't meet them until I'd already written two novels, and they were just kind of sitting around gathering dust.
Well,
So
sorry. I know a lot of people like with Indian martial arts is like a very limited time span. And like especially like Muay Thai can be very hard on the body. So
yeah,
I know that like if you go to Thailand, a lot of the people that fight are like 14 or 15.
exactly. In Thailand, until recently, most people by 26 they were retired. And then in the 90s, a lot of the Muay Thai guys would transition over to boxing. So they'd have like 200 Muay Thai fights. And then when they were 26, 27, they would switch over to boxing. Now, because there's a lot more Europeans that they're fighting and things like that who are older, there you see a lot more Thai fighters in their 30s. That just didn't exist in the 90s. You didn't see that.
So I know that like as you get older, like, obviously your speed goes down, your cardio goes down, and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of people, it kind of takes a toll on the body. And there's an argument over like whether, whether having the age and experience is better or having the youth and the vitality is a little bit better. But
Well,
do you,
I definitely wish that when I was 20, what was I, 27 or 28 when I fought for a world title, I definitely wish that I had the knowledge that I had at 30 or 33, but the same body. You know, I wish I had that 28-year-old body, but 33-year-old knowledge. I would have definitely captured that world title.
yeah.
I
Well,
should have captured it anyway, but made a few mistakes.
no, okay. Do you think that is one of those ones where the controversial decision, or was it you made some mistakes?
Well, I'll tell you if you really want to hear the mistakes I made. I Before the world title fight, I had two strippers in my dressing room. So
Or do the John Jones thing where he has like the excuse?
yeah.
Have you heard his excuse? He's like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
you like,
Well,
I'll do coke
I
before
wasn't
that
doing what
way.
he was doing. I wasn't drinking and doing cocaine and all that stuff. I didn't even drink back then. So but I definitely had a weakness for ladies. So
um,
still do.
I'm wondering if it's harder on your career if you do boxing as opposed to Muay Thai because you get hit in the head a lot more. Like that's a big thing
Boxing
with the
is
whole CTE thing.
Yeah, boxing is definitely a lot more dangerous with Muay Thai because you have so many different skills. If somebody has great hands, I can clinch them and knee them or step back and kick them. If they're a good kicker, I can step in and punch them. I have more options. Whereas boxing, all you've got is your two fists, and
Right.
it's just two guys punching each other in the head. That's a lot in my mind. For me, boxing was a lot more difficult and a lot more dangerous than Muay Thai was. Now, with Muay Thai, I had a lot more damage to my body, but less damage to my brain. and
Which is probably what you need being a future writer, that
yes,
would like at least you could stay sharp. Even if you get walk, you stay sharp. So
exactly.
what was the transition? Like what made you think maybe I'll go the writing route?
Well, so I'll tell you I had gotten a little bored with horror, because I was reading horror in the '80s during the heyday, and it when the market got really saturated and just they were just putting out a lot of junk,
See,
and
I
so I kind
remember
of
that
got
because I'm old, but a lot of people don't. They're like, what are you talking about? But yeah, it did.
yeah.
Yeah, like things go in bubbles.
Yeah, exactly. So in the '90s, I was reading mostly crime fiction and psychological thrillers and that type of thing. And then I picked up, I think it was probably around '98, I picked up Poppy Z. Bright's Exquisite Corpse. And that was so extreme, but also so beautifully written. And I thought that that signaled that horror had changed and had come of age. Because at that time, this was also the time of like hardcore hip hop and the movies had gotten real bloody and so I just figured that horror had followed suit. So I thought, hey, this is my time. They're ready for what I write. So I started submitting short stories, and it wasn't too long after that I realized that no, horror hadn't changed. There were just a few of us doing this shit, and when I started getting emails from people like, "Oh my God, that what you wrote was so wild, it's so crazy." Yeah, but I didn't even know. I hadn't read Ed Lee yet. I hadn't read Richard Lehman yet. I hadn't read any of them. So I was just writing what I like to write, and it wasn't until after I started getting the response that I got that I picked up those guys and started reading them.
Okay, when you start out, like you said, a lot of people were shocked, but I mean, the thing is, if you're not into horror, like you're shocked by almost anything. Do you feel like those guys, like they influenced you a lot, like in the direction you went and what you focus on, and like maybe getting a little more grisly, or maybe like backing away from it in some elements, and or refining your technique? Like, what was your process?
So I just wrote what I wanted to read, honestly. like I said, I was already published before. I mean, when I say published, short stories and things like that in anthologies and magazines before I even read what my contemporaries were writing. I just was just doing my thing. And so, and even once I started reading, like, the Ray Gardens, rest in peace, and um, Jack Ketchum and Ed Lee and all of those guys, even once I started reading them, my style was so different than theirs at that time. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to try and do what they do. I've already, by that time, I'd already kind of carved a niche for myself, writing the real kind of violent sexual stuff. And they were writing more just, speaking mainly of Ed Lee, he was writing more gross stuff. And my stuff wasn't necessarily gross. It was very violent, like uber violent, but not necessarily gross. And I was like, well, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And we all had very different styles.
Okay, do you feel like you've I mean everybody does have a different style, unless you directly copy someone, but do you feel like the style that you had, you like over time you've changed it and it's completely different than what it was in the beginning? Or do you feel that it's kind of an evolution?
So when I put together my first short story collection, I tried the Book of a Thousand Sins. I tried an experiment because I had two very different styles of writing at that time, or I should say thematically they were different. I had one where I was doing more socio-political stuff, more philosophical stuff, and then one where I was just doing the really violent, gross, sexual kind of stuff. And for when I put together that anthology, The Book of a Thousand Sins, I took what at the time I thought was a huge gamble, and I said I'm going to put my socio-political and philosophical stuff and my really violent stuff. I'm gonna put them all in the same book and see how that goes. And people really loved it. And so then when I started writing novels, at least the ones that got published, not the first two novels that went in the trunk. But when I started writing them, that's what I did. I said, I'm going to keep doing that, combining the socio-political and philosophical stuff with the really violent stuff. And that just became my style. And that's pretty much what I'm known for to this day, is that my stuff has meaning. I'm not just trying to scare you, which there's nothing wrong with that. I'd say there's nothing inherently what's the word that always get thrown around, gratuitous, about trying to scare someone or gross someone out or freak someone out, any more than it is trying to make someone sad or trying to make someone happy or make them laugh. There's nothing lesser about shocking them or scaring them. But
Right.
I wanted to do more. I wanted to shock them, scare them, and make them think.
Right. Well, I figure as long as it's a good story, it's like, it doesn't really matter like necessarily what it's about or like, what approach you use if you do it well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And story should drive everything. I think some of my early attempts to blend the violent stuff with the socio-political stuff may have leaned a little towards propaganda, but as I got older and
It
I
didn't
did
feel
it
as
for longer,
realistic and fresh as you wanted it to.
yeah, I got a little bit more finesse with it, and it's my stuff is definitely plot heavy and it's story driven, and now I make sure that the story calls for it. So if I have a story that doesn't really call for me to pontificate about the meaning of life, I'm not going to do it, just because that's what I'm known for. I'm just going to do whatever the story demands.
Okay. And did you have like because you told me that you like when you were first putting yourself out, you weren't really familiar with a lot of the like names in that niche
Yeah.
market. As you've gone along, have you gone, yeah, I want to like, go a little bit more towards like splatterpunk or bizarro or whatever.
No, I literally by that point I kind of had my own thing, and I just honestly didn't really care what everybody else was doing. I certainly wasn't going to try and fit into a specific genre. I just wrote what I wrote, And uh, I remember when Bizarro, there was a moment where Bizarro just seemed to get huge, and everybody was writing Bizarro, and they're like, "Oh, I'd love to see a Bizarro novel for you." That's not what I do, though. I
Right,
don't do
right.
Bizarro, so I wasn't going to do that. And even when the zombie craze was big, and before that was a paranormal, sexy vampires, stuff. I'm like, that's not what I do. It was huge at the time, and yeah, I'd probably be a much wealthier man if I had jumped on those trends. But it just wasn't what I did. So I just stuck with who I was and stuck with what I do.
Well, wealthier but less respected, because like, oh, that seller made all that fucking money. But yeah, so when you approach stuff, do you approach it more like first person, third person, present tense, past tense? Do you have like a mode that you're comfortable working in?
So most of my stuff is third person past tense because when I first started writing, you would have book guidelines or story guidelines that specifically said no first person. Everything has to be in third, and everything
Yeah,
has
I
to be
remember
in
that was
past
hated for a
in past
long
tense.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's when I first started. That was what was demanded of you to get into print, and now I do experiment with first person every now and again. And in fact, the book that I just published, The Bug Collector, is written in first person for the most part. Um, but and the reason why though I wrote The Bug Collector in first person is actually because I realized that prior to that, the only books that I'd written in first person I'd written from were the ones with a female lead character. And I was like, what does that say about me? That the only time I write in first person is when I'm writing in a female voice.
I feel like a first person is kind of like the shaky cam of writing. Like it could
Yeah.
be great or it could be horrible.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
like
It's
really
definitely a
far
rare.
one way or the other. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how much do you have out now?
I
Like novels, like short stories. You obviously have like a wide field, but I'm wondering like what's on print. What do you think people get a hold of? Like if you want to check it out yourself.
I honestly have no idea. I mean, I think I have over 30 books, maybe 3 dozen books, whether that be novels, novellas, short story collections, probably about 3 dozen at this point, and then short stories, a couple hundred at least.
Okay, you have a website that they could all see this on.
So the my website, wrathjwhorror.com, is pretty much only my newer stuff that I'm self-publishing. Everything else, you just go to Amazon like everybody else.
Do you have a like an Amazon authors page?
Yes, yes,
Do you have like a Goodreads page or I know you
I
have
do.
Facebook, because that's where we scheduled this.
Yeah, and yes, I have a Goodreads page. I'm also even on TikTok now. So
Are you
if
doing
you
the Just Ran funny videos?
no, I don't. I'm just not real good with the humor. Jeff is amazing at it. I mean, some of the stuff is probably funny, especially when we do the kind of group things with me and Shane McKenzie and Lucas Mangum. We actually get together and write, usually on Sundays, and we'll do a TikTok video of us just kind of talking shit and joking around. But everything else is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that's comical. It's comical that a little like the way that Jeff Strand does it, like you did the like re-envision of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. So it's like holding the book and getting pelted by tomatoes while he does
Mm.
it. And he like trying to
Yeah.
keep a straight face and like gets one in the forehead, but yeah.
Yeah, Jeff's amazing. He's hilarious.
So, do you have any plans with yourself? Like, some people are like, "Yeah, I just want a book." Some people are like, "Well, I wanted to branch out into like graphic novels. I want to branch out into like movies or TV series."
So I do have a plan. Shane and I had been talking about doing short films, In fact, and writing screenplays. In fact, Rabbit Hunt, my book that came out last year this time, or well, I finished it last year this time. It came out in December of last year. That was originally supposed to be a screenplay that Shane and I were going to write, and it just kept getting put off. And I just told Shane, "Hey, I'm just going to write the novel, and we can do the screenplay later." So we'll probably wind up doing that screenplay. But in the meantime, we're going to do a few short films because I've always been interested in that, and I just like that medium, because when you just write a novel and someone purchases the rights to do a movie and they do a film adaptation, it invariably sucks. like the good
There are a few
film
occasions where the movie is
adaptation
better
is a
than the
rare.
novel.
There's a few, yes, and a lot of times the directors want to put their stamp on it, and so they'll change things that don't even make sense to change. Like they'll just do it, in my mind, just so that they can say that they've put their own mark on the work. And sometimes it does wind up being a better film because of that. I freely admit that, but those are rare instances. Those are rare instances. Like, I think probably the best film adaptation of a book that I've seen would be Misery, because the book, if you read it, is very dark and dreary and depressing. And I thought, who is going to want to watch an hour and a half, 2 hours of this, of just a man lying in bed suffering? And when, I think it was Rob Reiner directed that one, and he added a little bit of humor, and that improved it so much, and in fact made it, in my mind, the movie better than the book, because of that little injection of humor.
Well, there are a couple, like my favorite movie of all time is The Shining, because I just think Kubrick is a master at crafting a world. And I know Stephen King was like not happy with that because he's like, well, this is not the way I envision it. It's like, well, okay, but there's Stephen King's version, and I think there's Kubrick's version, and you can be happy with both. I know with The Mist, I don't know if you saw the movie The Mist, but
yes.
like that ending, that dark
It was
ending in The
amazing.
Mist, amazing ending. That made the movie. But that ending,
Absolutely.
apparently Stephen King saw it, and he's from people change stuff. But he saw it, he goes, "Oh, I wish I thought of the ending."
Yeah. I mean, when they did the adaptation of my book, The Resurrectionist, and the movie is called Come Back to Me, there were a few things that really annoyed me that they changed because it made no sense. Like they changed the main antagonist, Dale. They changed his occupation from computer programmer to a grocery store clerk. And I'm like, first of all, that makes no sense. How does a grocery store clerk afford to rent a house by himself? And how does he have all this free time to fuck with people like he does? It made no sense. And it
Yeah, I
seemed
know
real
Hollywood often
arbitrary.
thinks they're smarter than, whatever. Like I know they redid Red Dawn, and I saw that as like a little kid. I mean, it's very Gene Western when you're like, I don't know, 10 or 8 or whatever. It's a cool movie, but I know that they remade it and they're like, well, it makes sense that we'll do China. Then they realize that China's a big movie market for them. So they're like,
Mhm.
oh no, we'll make it North Korea, which kind of makes no sense. Like what you were saying is like it makes it, why would North Korea invade the US? But,
Yeah.
but all right, man. So, I don't want to keep you here all day. I know you're a busy guy. You got a lot going on. But what's the best way that people can get a hold of you, see your stuff, throw
Well,
money
like
at
I
you?
mentioned, yeah, like you mentioned, I'm all over Facebook, all over TikTok. In fact, usually when I have a new book coming out, I'll announce it on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. I don't really do Twitter anymore. Like, is
It's
that
not
even a
Twitter, it's
thing?
X.
Yeah, it's X now. Yeah, I don't really do that anymore. In fact, I keep forgetting that I even have a X account or whatever. But I am on Blue Sky. I'm also on Threads, but again, very little. Mostly it's Facebook and TikTok and Instagram.
Okay. All right. So what's the best way to get a hold of you? Would it be Facebook? Would it be the website? Would it be Instagram?
Um, if you were trying to get a
You're
hold of
just
me,
nodding your head like
yeah,
you want.
yeah, yeah. Facebook is probably the easiest because I'm going to see it the fastest. So if you were looking to, I don't know, book me for a convention or a reading or something, messaging me on Facebook is probably the fastest way. Or if you go to my website, rafjwhorror.com, and you can email me through that, that'll I'll definitely see it that way. But if you send me a message on Instagram or X, I actually lost a really big opportunity because someone messaged me on Twitter, and I didn't even know Twitter had a messenger feature. So I found it like 6 months later, and I was really upset because it was actually for the Black Panther anthology, and I would love to have been in that.
Yeah.
But I didn't even see the invitation for 6 months. You know,
Yeah,
so
I don't know if it's are you talking about the Marvel Black Panther?
yes, yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
I saw the first movie and I liked it. I heard the second movie isn't that good. I don't know. I haven't
No,
seen it.
no. Well, this was for an anthology they were putting together of stories in the Black Panther universe, and
Okay.
and like I said, I got the invite for the anthology, but I didn't see it because they sent it through Twitter. And I didn't even know Twitter had that feature where you can send direct messages. So I never saw it for 6 months, and then I messaged him and say, "Hey, is that offer still
It's a
available?"
little bit
No,
late, yeah.
yeah, it's too late now. That was crushing because I would have loved to have written a Black Panther story.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that would be awesome. Actually, let me ask you one more thing before you go. About Killercon because I enjoy
Mhm.
Killercon. I remember I was doing all the covers for Splatterpunk Design, and I remember I talked to Jack Bantry, who puts that out, and he put me in touch with Lisa, and then I talked to Lisa, and she goes, "Oh, you're the guy who does the covers." And so the first time I did it was a couple years ago, and then I've done it every year since. How long has that been going on though? Like
Killer
how
Well,
long is the convention?
the very first KillerCon was in 2009 in Las Vegas, and we ran it in Vegas for 5 years, and then shut it down in 2014. And then I want to say it was 2016 or 2017 that we revived it here in Austin, Texas, and it's been running ever since. So total of 14 years, but there was a break in there. There was a break when I moved to Austin, well, 2 or 3 years. I can't remember exactly now.
Do you prefer Vegas or Austin? Like how's the vibe?
It's a very different vibe. Austin is very different than when I was doing KillerCon in Vegas. We were really trying hard to make it more than just splatterpunk. We went for science fiction authors, paranormal romance authors, quiet horror, even science fiction authors. We had every type of author there as a guest of honor. But the only people who actually showed up, the attendees, didn't matter if we had a major science fiction writer there. It was still all the splatterpunk readers that showed up. And so when we moved it to Austin, we just kind of decided to kind of
Focus more on the Splatterpunk
give the
side.
market what it was asking for, and we still have different types of authors every now and again, but definitely the focus has shifted more towards splatterpunk and extreme horror authors, uh, because again, that's the readership that shows up.
I remember the first year I did it, you had separated, so you had like an author's room, an artist room, and then they just all kind of combined.
Yes,
Um,
yeah.
was there a plan, or that's just kind of the way it worked out?
Yeah, we try different things every year, and we learn from those things. And the one of the things that we learned was that, yeah, the artists wanted to be in the same room as the authors because it's just more traffic there. So having the artists in a separate room, they weren't getting the same amount of traffic. People weren't coming in to see the art as much as when they were in the vendor area. So we just switched it up.
one thing I noticed about Killercon that I like a lot is so I've done a Killercon, and Killercon has like a ton of people came there, but they didn't come to the vendors room. So you're in the vendors room and you're like watching tumbleweeds roll by, and you're like,
Mm,
where is everyone? Then you go to the panels and they're packed. So
yes.
apparently people come in, go see the panels and leave. Whereas with KillerCon, it seems like people do everything. When people go to the panels, in between, they go to the
Mm,
manager's room, which I liked.
yeah, yeah. There's a reason for that. At StokerCon and some of the other larger conventions, you'll have 3 or even 4 tracks of programming. So people are racing around trying to see everything and having to choose between 3 different things in the same time slot. In KillerCon, we have one single track of programming, so you never have to choose between going to a reading of your favorite author and sitting on a panel of 5 of your favorite authors. Um, it's you're going to have a reading, then a panel, then a reading, then a panel, and so in between that, you're going to go to the vendor's room because there's nothing else going on. You don't have a choice of 3 or 4 different things to go see. There's one thing in that time slot. So if that's not your thing, you're going to go to the vendor room. You know?
Yeah, I also noticed it. Like the readings seemed a lot better attended. Like SacreCon, the panels were very heavily attended, but the readings like very hit or miss. Like some you
Yeah,
had like 5 people in there or less. Some you had like 20 people in there.
yeah.
And nobody seemed to be really as into it. I mean, it's like it's gonna sound like I'm kissing SacreCon's ass, but SacreCon's ass, but it's like with Killer Cons, like it seems like the people were more into it. They were like, just I'll check it out. Maybe I'll be
Well,
here a
and,
little bit.
and that also goes to, like I said, because there's a single track of programming, you're not having to choose between a panel you really wanted to see and sorry, a reading by an author you may not be familiar with. So if you're a newer author or an author that maybe just doesn't have the same hype behind them, and you're up against a panel that has like, you know, all these big name authors on it, your reading is going to be very poorly attended. You don't
Right.
have that issue at KillerCon. At KillerCon, if you're doing a reading, you're the only thing in that time slot. So you're highlighted. And we like to mix it up, and we'll have newer authors doing readings. We'll have established authors doing readings. And a lot of people, their very first reading they ever did was at KillerCon.
Okay. And I really like the so I did a reading this is in Scardiff, Wales. It's called well it's Cardiff, but they call it Scardiff. And I did a
Mm-hmm.
reading there and it went very well. I did a reading in SugarCon. I thought it was horrible. And then
Mm.
was that your dog?
Yeah, that's Hades.
And then I did a reading at KillerCon and it went really well. It kind of restored my faith in it. I remember I was talking to Lisa and she was talking about me doing a reading. I was like, I don't know, I just didn't want it so con didn't go well. She was like, yeah, but that's the way they are. They're up and down. So I did, but I really enjoyed it. But yeah, man. So thank you for being on this. Thank you for making the time. I know you're a busy guy. And do you have anything else you want to throw out there?
No, well, just that my newest novella, The Bug Collector, will be available September 30th on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. Um, and then the limited edition hardback will be available on my website, wrathjwhorror.com. And that the limited edition has illustrations in it from Jim Agapalza. So yeah, that's and they're truly horrific illustrations. So if you want to get a hardback, that hardback will not be available on the 30th. It'll be probably a week or two later. I'm going to debut it at AuthorCon in St. Louis, so October 4th.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I maybe it's because I do illustrations on my book, but I love when people do illustrations in books. I think that really brings it to life. But yeah,
Mm.
man. So thank you for doing this. And like I said, is there anything else you want to say?
No, that's it. Well, yeah, if you haven't come to KillerCon, you've heard us talk about it, make the trip, especially if you're into splatterpunk and you're into extreme horror, even if you're just into horror. Um, this is something you have to come see. It's like a family reunion for us, so come check it out.
It I will say the difference between Killercon and SaberCon just seems like a bunch of people are like, oh yeah, right. And the SaberCon's like, oh hey man, what's up? So it has more of like a familial vibe.
Yeah, absolutely.
So all right, man. Well, thank you for doing this, and
Thanks
I'll
for
see you at
having
the
me.
next Killercon.
All right. See you then.